Hello, hello. Welcome back. I've been checking out the chat, just getting myself organized, and it's really exciting to be back. I've just been on holidays, and I'm all tanned, relaxed, rested, and ready to get into mixing. Yes. So I hope you're all really good. And I see we've got some people. Drunk Bishop, what's up? I didn't know that you were from Florida, but welcome. Crispy Florida, warm, does that mean warm? Who else have we got here? We can see some familiar faces. William C. Beckham, welcome back, friend. Who else have we got? Vico from Norway, hey, how's it going? Nebu, did I say that right? From, I'm not quite sure where you're from. Peace to you as well. Who else have we got in the air fryer? Uzbekistan, awesome. Hey, what's up? Let's music your life. How's it going, mate? Nice to see you. Mukund, that's really nice to see you on the stream, Mukund. Welcome. Hope everything's good in Delhi. You're in Delhi, right? Awesome. So people are asking what DAW I'm going to teach in today, and I am teaching in Ableton. No, wrong. I'm teaching in Pro Tools today. Pro Tools is my DAW of choice. It's the one I'm just have been using for the longest time. So I just got back from holidays yesterday, so I'm still in the holiday mode. So I just went for what is easiest for me today. So, as I've said many times, this is a non-DAW specific thing that we're doing. We're thinking about listening and what we're listening for. And we're also talking about audio processing, which is really, it's independent of the DAW, it doesn't matter. Cool. Okay. So, Drunk Bishop is using Pro Tools to mix his Ableton sessions. That's actually also what I do. Yeah, nice one. So those of you who are Ableton freaks, I get it. It's a great program. I use it as well. And I will do mixes in Ableton. I'll do the next mix session I'll do in Ableton. So I'll move around between Ableton and Pro Tools. I could also mix in Logic. I feel like Pro Tools and Logic are quite similar though. So just let me know if anyone's really desperate for a Logic mix, and I can do that as well. Yeah. Okay. So nice to have you all again. Some familiar faces, hopefully some new faces. I should introduce myself. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Jane Arnison. Hello. And I am a mix engineer, which is helpful because I'm here to talk about mixing. And I am from Berlin. Well, I live in Berlin, but I'm actually Australian, if you can't tell. And I have been mixing for many years, probably about 15 years or something now. And I also am a producer and an artist and all that jazz. I have a band called Evolve, check it out, and a solo project as well. Various things. And I mix lots of different people around the world. Obviously, these days we can mix people from anywhere. I'd work with lots of Berlin artists and stuff like that. So that's who I am, and really excited to be here. I love these mixing sessions, and I'm super excited that ADSR have invited me and happy to have me around to keep on doing more of these. I really love the chat. The thing that I'm loving about this the most actually is that it's kind of like a little game for me, or a test for me. It's like each week I have to pick a mix up and kind of think about it and think about how I would talk about it. So normally I would just like get in and do a mix for a client. But this way of like having to discuss it and deconstruct it, I guess, is kind of slightly different. So I like the game of it. So we're all having fun. So today we are doing, oh gosh, now I've totally just drawn a blank. 1 second. We are doing Out of the Shadow, and I can't recall who the artist is. Again, I'm sorry, I didn't write it down. Out of the Shadow, the vibe is a kind of, well, you'll hear it in a second. It's drivey. There's kind of rock elements to it. It's kind of like progressive, I guess the progressive stuff. It reminds you a little bit of Can and things like that. Yeah, what I try to do is pick out, to try different genres or different things that have different aspects of the mix that I can bring forward. So that's what we're doing. Now, I've got seen a few questions here. Before we get into it, I'll answer a few questions. Someone asked, I think it was Vico, asked how I find Logic. I love Logic. Like, Logic was my first DAW that I used when I was like very young, and it was Logic version 2.5. So you can, it's a long time ago. So I have a soft spot for Logic. I've known it for very many years. I do use it sometimes. I use it when I'm doing production or film work or writing sessions, because it just has the sounds and stuff faster, and for like notational stuff it's better obviously than Ableton. Ableton I think is better for sound design, and Pro Tools I think is better for mixing. That's just my vibe, so that's how I go with them. Someone was also asking, seeing me sitting in front of a pair of Adam S3H. Yes, they're amazing. I mean, I actually use S3Vs. I was tossing up between S3H and S3V, and I went for the S3V because for me, it's slightly clearer down and then in the low end. So yeah, they're amazing. They're amazing speakers. Amazing. Okay, so Anthony's saying, is there an opportunity for mixed feedback? If you want to, now this is actually a good segue. Any of you that are on the stream, maybe it's the first time that you've been here, if you want to get your mix mixed live, which equals very specific and in-depth mixed feedback, you are very welcome to, and you should get connected with the ADSR community if you're not already, and through the Discord is where you can submit your mix for mixed feedback. I'm also thinking that what I might do, and actually let me know about this, is that I might do a session, because I've done quite a few of these like mixing, like mixing a track. I might do a session where I pick like, I'll go through 4 or however many you can fit in, 4 or 6 tracks of you, and I'll just listen to the track as a stereo file and give you mixed feedback based on what I hear. Is that interesting for you? Would that be cool? Would you like that? Or is it better that I stay in the DAW? Let me know. Also I should say I've just kind of segued into ADSR. Those of you who don't know ADSR, where have you been? But I'm sure that all of you do. But just to kind of refresh your memory, or anyone who kind of is just dropping in, ADSR is an amazing platform where, we kind of bring everything together about music. So music and production, I guess, as well, specifically. So you can get samples, sample packs. You can buy plugins. A huge amount of plugins are there. You can also get mixed feedback from me by getting part of the Discord community. There's a huge plethora of tutorials and things like that. So make sure that you check it out to get more information and to really get into it. Awesome. All right. Okay. So let me know if you think you would, just to reiterate that, if you would like a session of stream where I go through and I do like 10-minute feedback for 6 tracks, let me know. Okay. All right. So let's get into it. Who is the person whose track this is actually on the stream today, Out of the Shadow? I hope they are. That would be a shame if they're not. Anyway, okay, so we're going to move on anyway. It's there's lots of really good stuff to learn and to check out. So as I always do, we're going to start off with I'll play the demo. So the master of the producer or the mix engineer producer that has submitted it, and then I'm going to kind of work back, and I'll play mine, and then we'll work back from it. Okay, so let's have a listen now. As you know, everyone who's been here is playing along before. What we do is I want you all to take notes as you go and think about how you would do it. And then, this is a way that this can be an active experience for you rather than kind of sitting back, okay? So when you're first listening to a track before you start mixing it, there's lots of different names for it. Mixer Man, has anyone heard of Mixer Man? He's a legend, many great mixing books that you should check out. He calls it discovery and framing. So that is the first time you listen to a track, you really listen to it, get a sense of what you're working with. You start to think about what you might do, how you'll set it up. You might think about the routing. You start to get a mental picture of what's going on. So in addition to that, you'll also be thinking about like, are there problems that I can hear? What is the emotional content? What's driving this? Is it a song about emotion, or is it about groove and rhythm? Like, so you're starting to really try and get a sense of what's going on. Okay, that's what I'm going to do now, and that's what all of you can do whilst we're listening. Okay, so with no further ado, let's listen. Here we go. Play the whole song all the way through because we've kind of heard enough, I guess. So that's the song. I'll just stop and then reset. So okay, so a few people have said vibe. There's a groove and it's moving, right? So that's really a very important thing to recognize, is that driving aspect has got to stay and has to be there. It's already working. The vocal is amazing. It's very strong. The tone of the voice is really good. And I just saw that the person who submitted this is an Aussie. So they're fast asleep. Well, he'll have to watch the stream, catch up. So for the rest of us, this is a great opportunity for us to work on a really interesting song. So so basically for me, there's a lot that's really good about it. And also, one of the things that I will admit to you all here, every time I do a mix, and I think it's actually really healthy, every time I get a mix, I feel like, oh shit, I don't know if I can do this any better. And I think that kind of, fear, I guess, and also the fact that you're about to step into the unknown. There's no it's not a cookie cutter approach. There's no set rules. And every time you do something, you don't really know what you're going to do until you kind of dive into it. So I always feel like slightly anxious, but that gets me excited to do the mix. So again, with this, I was like, there's a lot that's already really good about this. Can I do anything to make it any better? And if so, what, right? So what I thought about was, I think that there's some in the low, like, which is always the case in the low, across the toms, the kick, the bass, and even the snare is quite low. There was some stuff that I could clean up in the drums and the bass. Now, unfortunately, the drums was sent as a stereo stem, so it kind of makes it difficult. I have done a lot of work on the drums, and I'll show you that. Even in a stereo file, you can still do a lot. So yeah, but having the drums separate would have been better. The other thing was that I felt that the vocals could come out more. They were really good, and I really felt that they could bring out more of the emotion. And like, this has kind of got, is it like I wanted to make it come even more alive. Like, I think there's an energy and intensity there that kind of wants to come out more. So that was kind of my task. And to kind of clean up some of the guitars, because there are certain sounds in the mid range that you can't hear, or I couldn't hear them until I went through the stems, and I was like, oh, I didn't even hear that. Okay, so they're my notes from the beginning. And let me play you what I've got to so far, and I'll A-B it a bit as I do, and we can see where it's at. Okay, so I'll just turn it back up a bit, and here's my mix. Come on, Pro Tools. Maybe I'll just stop that. So, the mix isn't finished, but I got enough to really kind of talk about. So basically what I felt that I wanted to do was like get the vocals to come out, and I was trying to kind of figure out how to get that bass to sit in with the drums. So let's just get into it. I'm going to just solo the drums at first, and let's start there. Okay, so my water. So let's start from where it was. Now, okay, let me start from the beginning, because this was the mix without any, this was the mix that I got, right? So, which is very different from the master that was sent through. So this is, okay, so this is the stems before I started working on them. Okay, so maybe I should A-B that really, rather than the master, because yeah, the master's be mastered. Anyway, all right, so what I needed to do, if you just heard that, was there needed to be some gain staging, because it was actually very quiet. So I've gain staged, and I did a bunch of different things. So the drums have come up significantly. The bass also, not as much though. So I felt the bass was too loud. It was sticking out the top. And so the problem is that when we turned it down, then it was getting lost. So then that says to us all as mix engineers, okay, so we need to identify the frequencies of that bass that need to cut through the mix, and then maybe prioritize them in the bass and cut them out in other parts, i.e. the drums is the main kind of area, and some of the low mids of the guitars and the piano stuff, right? So there's a gain stage happening first. And there was also, for example, if we check out, so you can see they're really, really small. They're very, very quiet. These guitars, how much have I put them up? So this has been put up 9.5 dB, okay? So I've really done quite a lot of gain staging before I started the mix. Let's go back to the drums, okay. Oops, hang on. Oh, I'll turn off that Yes. Okay, cool. And now we go to the drums. Okay. Now, the drums are really good. They're very stereo. They've got a nice, good, low vibe. The main problem that I have with them, although I just leave them alone, is that they're not blending with the bass. And there's kind of a problem there. So I was kind of trying to find ways to clean up some aspects of the low, and there's kind of a little bit of fluffiness, I would say, in the kind of the low mids and the low frequencies. So I've done a few things. I haven't actually done it yet, but I was thinking as I was getting ready to putting on my makeup for the stream, was that maybe a multi-band compression might have been the go for this. But anyway, let's check it out. So what I did first was I tried to kind of clean up, cut out some of the woofy low, really low stuff that we don't, I mean, particularly in this kind of style of music, we don't need it. I could potentially go even a little higher. There was a weird resonance in here that I kind of tried to take out, and I was trying to clear up some of this. Because the thing is that how do you make something present but not harsh? And that was a real challenge in some of these things here. So there's a bit of EQ there. Okay, just very subtle. Here's where things start to change. Okay, so here I pushed, so here actually, and that was wrong. Okay, so I've pushed 100 up a little bit, and then I've cut out, what I wanted to do was cut out lower than that. So I want to get the fundamental, which is at 43. I want that to kind of go, and I want to prioritize the overtone, which is like 100 and is it like 80 hertz or something, 86. I also decided to do a push up in the really brilliant region, because I actually cut away a lot of the kind of 3.5K because it felt quite harsh. Also because when the vocals are coming through, it might sound fine now, but when the vocals are coming through, it was like competing. So that's a reason for taking this area down. And then I was trying to clean up some of the low mid kind of woofiness basically. So that's what I did. Okay, let's hear it without. With. I felt like I just cleaned it up a little bit. More EQ. Now here's something a little bit special that I think is worth talking about. So what I've got here, now that you can use this with anyone, this is a, what is it? Dynamic EQ. And what I noticed is that, and I don't think it's at the beginning part, so I think it's actually a little bit later. I think it might be, is it here? No. Yeah, here. Okay, so this bit in particular, even though it's kind of present elsewhere, but it's easy to show it here. Now I'm just going to mute solo this. That was hurting me, so I took it out. Now, and also, but you can see here this is mono. So what I noticed was that because it's a full drum part, right? So I don't know how many. There could be 12, 14 different tracks. So this is when you're working with a stereo stem like this, it's harder to kind of figure it out, right? So you've got to be more specific about what part you're going to affect. So there was a or this sound that was actually, I found it was actually in the mono stream, and then there was something else in the sides. So let's listen to that. Right, and then this one. Okay, so I process them in different ways basically. One of these is with the low shelf, and the other is a cut. Okay, and then there's a dynamic EQ happening on it. So that was helping me to sort out some of it, because again, what's the reason for using the dynamic EQ is so that it's not going to always take it out. It's only taken out when it gets really active, so that it keeps the drums alive. Because that was one of the things that I felt, that the drums were not as alive as they could be. So I wanted to keep that. Okay, so we're there. Okay, then next, talking about the drums being alive. Now, I don't use parallel compression very often, but this was a perfect moment when I wanted to use parallel compression. So what I've got here is I have parallel going into an 1176, and I put it on all button mode. So maybe I'll just play that by itself. Can I do that? Maybe I'll make this pre-fader, and then you can hear, mute that and solo that. Okay. Yeah, I'll just remember where that's at, and then turn it up. Oh, what? Why is that not working? Here we go. Okay, so this is 1176 all button in mode. Have you heard of it? Has anyone heard of what the all button mode is or what it does? Let me know. So what I've done with this is basically I felt that the drums were kind of slightly, I wouldn't say over compressed, but there was some part of them that they'd lost a bit of the transient power, and it was a little bit like woofy or something. So in order to bring them back, I thought, okay, I can use this all button in technique, and it kind of re-livens up. It kind of activates the transients and makes it jumpy again. So Vico is saying he's never heard of the all button in mode. So basically, and this is on an emulation, it has an all button mode. But if you had the real thing, you would press all of the buttons, like all of these in at once. And on certain versions of this 1176 emulation, that's what you have to do. You hold command, I think, and then you press them all in. On this Waves one, you just hit the all button mode. And that is it was, I think originally in the original one in the 60s when it was made or something, it was a mistake. So people found what it did. I don't know exactly, so we'll have to read the manual, but it changes the circuit path basically, and it creates a weird cool effect. So, I mean, check it out. It's super interesting, but it basically livens it up and makes it really reactive. And you can see that the release is super fast. Okay, so the result was that it makes it feel more like jumpy, right? So listen to it and tell me if you agree. Okay, with it out off. I mean, also louder, obviously. Hang on. Okay, right. It just really brings out the kind of transient parts. So I like that, but then I thought this is too much. It's actually too much to do that to the whole drums. So then when you go, I like this effect was too much, that's when you go, okay, time for parallel processing, right? So I don't always automatically go for parallel processing. I like to do it when I think it's necessary. So this was one of those moments, okay? So now I'm going to turn that off again and reset that. And let's listen to it now, them together. So I'll turn it off, then I'll add it in. Now adding it in. Yeah. I also potentially, listening to this now, I want to take out some of the lows there. Yeah, just make it too thick. Cool. Okay. So the drums are sounding pretty good then. I did go one step further, but I'll come to that in a minute. Let's now go to the bass and have a listen to what's going on with that. Okay. So you can see here also with the drums, they sound good already. There's nothing massive dramatic stuff. It's just like trying to find out where there were some problems and like make some subtle adjustments. And at this stage, particularly on a full drum stem, it will have a big impact, right? Okay, here's the bass. Now again, the bass is cool. It just needs to fit, it needs to play nice a bit more. So first step is, for me, was EQ. So what I did was I pushed up around 800 or 900, I think it was. What is it? Oh no, 1000, okay. Then I cut out a little bit of 200 and I boosted some of the subs. I'm going to make that a little bit higher. No, that's fine. Okay, then I cut out the ultra subs and that's it. And I also added some subtle compression here as well. Okay, so let's turn it off and on. Then I also added, now you can see that I took away some of the some of the 200, and then because I took away 200, it needs to come, we still need the bass to be low, so I use this because it just sounds nice and it beefs things up a bit, and I brought back in 100. I like this because it also can attenuate it, so it keeps it kind of tight in the way that this EQ works. Have you heard of the EQ, the Pultec EQ before? It has this really cool feature where it boosts and cuts apparently the same frequency at the same time, and you're like, what? But it's got to do with phase, and also has to do with the curves of the different filters that are they're slightly off from each other. So there's an overlap, and it has this really cool way of boosting and then kind of tightening. So it's cool. Check it out if you haven't used it before. So with this, I boosted quite a lot and then did a subtle attenuation to bring the life back in. Then I compressed it using an optical compressor, which I used because I want, this is a driving, I want it to kind of feel kind of a little bit more contained and not have those transients pop out as much. So that's why I used that. Okay, let's have a listen to where it's at now. Cool. Okay, so people know all that Pultec. So, yeah. Okay, so it's not starting to sound like something now, right? If we go back, that's what we had before. We've given it just, yes. Okay, good. Now, let's listen to it with the drums. Now that was sounding cool, I liked it, but I wanted to get a bit more, okay? So I'm wanting to go a little bit more. And again, one of the themes of this mix today is saturation, and because there's a lot of saturation going on in this and different ways that I'm using saturation. In rock music, it's obviously more easy to use it like aggressively, let's say, or more aggressively because rock music lends itself to distortion and stuff. But really saturation is used across every genre these days, and particularly in mixing. It's like the secret sauce of getting things to have, body and depth and kind of cut through. So spend lots of time thinking about saturation as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that right now. So what I did next was I'm really into this particular distortion. It has two different, it's tube saturation. So you can see the lovely tube there, and there's two different types of tubes. I think this is similar to Thermonic Culture Vulture. This one is a little bit more high end and is cleaner. Culture Vulture is like, the Thermonic Culture Vulture is really aggressive and really dirty. So I use this more in mixing these days when I want to have a bit more control over it. Yeah, so Let's Music Your Life is saying saturation plugins are the most favorite. Yeah, definitely. It's magical, really, what it can do. Okay, so what I did here was, let's just listen to it. Now I should really gain stage a bit better so I'm not tricking myself. Turn it off. Now it seems, this is the thing that's important there, is it seems as though it's getting much louder, but it actually, it was subtly, but I turned it down. But what it actually is doing is it's filling out and thickening up the kind of the overtones from the root note, like let's say the fundamental is like 80 hertz or something, all the way across. So it's like thickening it up and making it more kind of thick, I guess. Okay, so what that means is it's really going to help that bass to come through the mix as I've taken away some of these top transient stuff. So hopefully this is what we want. It's going to link it better to the drums where it was kind of feeling separate. But then when I beef up this, the drums go, oh, I want some more power too. So then of course I do the same thing to the drums. Check it. Now, I've got to say with this, I haven't tuned this perfectly yet. There's still some problems in the drums. Let me listen to it and we'll kind of look at it together. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so I had it slightly lower, and it was starting to kind of be that boofy kind of woofy, woolly kind of thing that I was trying to get out of the drums. So I wanted to listen into that and kind of fix that. So I think that's sounding better. Me being me, when I'm in a mix, I would probably spend half an hour fiddling with this and getting it exactly right. But you get the idea of where it's at. Yeah. So let's have a check in with the demo.
Spitting them out just like a child. I'm trying to grow up.
Okay, so what I wanted to do was make the drums a little bit more beefy, and just kind of take away a little bit of the kind of it was a bit too brilliant, I think, on the top. All right, okay, so we've got our bass and drums feeling pretty good. Now let's go. I think the next thing that I would do in this mix, or that I did do in this mix, was go to the vocal. So let's check out the vocal, and then we'll have a look at what I did. Now again with
No, to set things straight, yeah. I'm smiling at you while you laughing at me.
Okay, so you can hear it sounds awesome already. It sounds really good. It's really processed and it's really done. So there's not much that I'm wanting to do or really can do without destroying this vocal. So again, like I would probably have liked to have had a bit more option to maybe make the vocal mono and then create the stereo myself so I can balance it in with the other instruments appropriately if I was doing the mix properly. But whatever, this is what I've got. And also the fact that the effects are on the vocal track means that the clarity, it's harder to get the clarity and the depth in the mix to cut through. So I would always kind of want to be able to have a, you know, a better, have them separate so I could work on it. Hang on, so someone's saying a bit ironic that a streaming regarding better audio and the audio is scuffed. I don't understand what that is. Are there problems with the audio? Let me know if there are problems. Maybe it's my internet or something. Okay, well anyway, let's just see what's going on. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so basically the vocal's already really good, and the idea that what I would want to do here is think about, it's not the vocal by itself that is the issue, it's the fact that the vocal in the context of the other sounds in the mix is not kind of working as well as it could, right? So what we want to do here is to think about how it can, basically I want it to cut through more. So let's listen to this here.
Set things straight.
Okay, so you could see that the bass was a bit too loud and it was coming, it was coming out louder than the other aspects, and also the transient parts of the drums was louder than the vocals, right? So that's what I've been trying to pay attention to adjusting. So I did some EQ. Obviously EQ is a pretty important aspect of working and balancing these things. So let's have a listen to it with just some EQ.
No, to set things straight, yeah.
I'll turn it off.
I'm smiling at you while you laughing at me.
Okay, so you can see what I've done here is it felt that there was a little bit of muddiness, or kind of like this that kind of push, which is around 500 hertz. So I cleaned that up. There was also kind of some energy down here, which we can't hear anyway because of all of the bass stuff, and it wasn't a part of it. So it was an artifact of the sound. So I cut it out, okay? And then there was, up in this range, because of the processing, the auto-tune and stuff that's going on, it is, there was some times with different parts of the sounds, or different parts of the syllables and things like that, where it was feeling like ouchy, basically. So what I've tried to do is to isolate those and think about the best way to take them out. So sometimes it was in around the 3K, what's this, 3 or 2.7, I decided to cut it out And in the upper region, I use dynamic EQ. So let's isolate this and have a little listen to it.
No, to set things straight, yeah. Smiling at you while you laughing at me.
Okay, let's turn it off and just see if you can hear those.
No, to set things straight, yeah. I'm smiling at you while you laughing at me.
Okay, so laughing at me, like that bit just there was when that came through, so we wanted to cut that out. Okay, so let's have a listen to this top bit.
No, to set things straight, yeah.
Okay, so that was again quite harsh. But again, if I cut it out entirely, there was parts where it felt like it was flat. So I decided to use a dynamic EQ there, as you can see.
No, to set things straight, yeah. I'm smiling at you.
And there's actually two different tones that are going on there. So there's this one.
To set things straight, yeah.
And then this one. Okay, so there's two different kind of parts of the overtones and stuff. Cool. Okay. All right. So now I see that I had it too loud when I was talking. I apologize about that. Yeah, please let me know if there's any weird audio stuff. It's sometimes hard to figure out. So I'll just make sure that I'll just turn down the audio master there. Is it turn my mic up? I don't know if I can turn my mic up. Hello. I'll just speak closer to it. Sorry about that. All right. Okay. So that is the vocal EQ. Now, then I use different plugins. I use them for fun sometimes and also just to kind of, I don't know, share different ways of doing things. This is a SSL vocal strip, and there is a compressor. There is some kind of subtle saturation. There's a de-esser, a deploser, which is for the all those kinds of things, and then some EQ. Okay, so I went through and kind of did this to taste, and let's have a listen to what it sounds like.
No, to set things straight, yeah. I'm smiling at you while you laughing at me.
So here it just again, it's already been compressed and it's already kind of had all that stuff done to it. So when I just, it wasn't too aggressive. You can see here that the S-ing and everything isn't too crazy.
No, to set things straight.
Okay, just gentle. With this, this was just like a subtle curve, and I heard something weird here, so I took it out. So that's what I did, and I thought that the most important thing really about this is when we put it in the mix, right? So how can we hear it or not? Now Sam is saying, so this vocal, is that auto-tune on it? Yeah, I think so. It's some kind of auto-tune. I don't know exactly which one, but there's definitely auto-tune. And I can tell that it's auto-tune also because other than obviously hearing the tuning, the thing that I'm listening to now as a mix engineer, right, not as a producer, is the artifacts that happens to the formant shaping. So it's in the upper transients, and that can create harshness or edginess kinds of sounds. The vocal is amazing. So my job as a mix engineer is to take away anything that might reduce the listener's enjoyment of this really cool vocal, right? So that's my job in this instance. So that's what I've been paying attention to do. And that's why the EQ is so specific and detailed up there. Okay. Now, the final thing that I did was to add some space. Now, because this is a weird one because it's already got spatial processing on it. So why did I do more? Well, the reason that I did more was that in the mix, I still need to use space for the vocal so that it's like the vocal needs to have a space within the mix space, if that makes sense. It's not just as an effect or as a mood effect. It's about actually helping the vocal to kind of like take its place in the mix. Oh, sorry. Okay, so what I used for this was a slap delay. It feels appropriate for the genre, and it felt cool, and I thought it was nice. Again, with these kinds of things, I would do these, and then I'd have to talk to the producer because they have very specific opinions, particularly about things like delays because it crosses over into production, right? Excuse me, I need to burp. Okay, so I used this is just the H delay, no feedback. You can use any delay, right? So the key thing is about knowing what to do with it. No feedback. I put it into lo-fi because it worked with this kind of vibe and sound. And I changed the EQ slightly so that it feels as though it's slightly back. And then I did this to taste with milliseconds, basically. So let's have a listen to it.
No,
Turn it off.
set things straight, yeah.
And then on.
I'm smiling at you while you laughing at me.
Cool. And that I just really liked. I thought it sounds really cool. And again, I'll play it in the mix, and the important thing is for you to hear how it works in the mix, basically. I can see some of the questions there. I'm just going to keep on rolling with this, and I'll come back to questions in like 10 minutes at the end of the stream. But there are some really cool questions there. So yeah, stay tight. I'll come back with it. Okay, so I put a Vox slap, and then I created another ambience just for kind of a little bit more of depth perspective.
No, to set things straight, yeah.
That's this. I'll turn it up so you can hear it really easily.
Smiling at you while you laughing at me.
Okay, so the reason that I did that was so that I could help the vocal to have a bit more depth, because it felt kind of flat. It wasn't, again, we want the sounds to kind of feel as though they're interacting on the multiple dimensions of the mix. So that was why I did that. All right, so let's now listen to and I did the same for the backing vocal. I don't have time to kind of go through this, other than to say with the backing vocal, I did a different thing in that I pushed the mid-range because I wanted it to have more of a characterization. So the extreme version of this would be like a telephone EQ setting. I didn't want it that extreme, but I wanted to bring in a little bit of that so it felt a little bit more different, because it was kind of really lost in the mix in the original one, okay? So let's actually have a listen to that. Okay. Hang on, sorry, we just had the demo playing as well. Take two. I thought that sounded not great. Okay, here we go.
Precious time on me.
And actually, I would probably push that a little bit further. Now, the question is whether I just turn it up, and maybe I'll try that. Now, let's listen to the demo. Okay, so you can hear that it's just helping the vocal to kind of cut through because it wasn't coming through. So the idea about this is also to create an excitement of the song, of these different sounds coming out and really bringing the track to life, because it's a cool track. I'm really into it. Okay, so we've talked a lot about bass, drums and vocals. And in terms of the other aspects, with the guitars, the main thing that was happening with the guitars was that they were feeling like separate, or I couldn't hear them. So let's look at the guitars a little bit. So let's start with this guitar. So I turned this up 10 dB. Let's listen to it in the mix. Now we'll listen to the demo. Can't really hear it. Okay, so I really couldn't hear that, and it was cool, and it was important accent to the groove. So
it's not too late, to set things straight.
So one of the main things I did was like turn these up and make them work together. Let's listen to the other electric guitar. Now here, this is a phrase that goes across a bunch of different guitars and the bass. So the trick with this little transition bit was to make them kind of work so that and again, the other thing about mixing is I often talk a lot and we often think a lot about the audio processing, and we're kind of thinking about how sounds blend with each other, like vertically. I guess if you think about playing a chord, when we're thinking about frequency, we're thinking about how sounds kind of stack together through the frequency spectrum. So it's kind of a vertical sensibility. But then also when we're mixing, we're trying to think on like the horizontal axis in terms of time, right? So maybe that's not the horizontal axis. It's the fourth dimension of mixing. Woo. So basically the most important thing is, how is the mix developing in time? How is it taking us through? How is it exciting us from 1 minute to the next, to the next, to the next? So transitions are really important, and any kind of motivic phrases that kind of are shared between different parts, that's also something that we really need to pay attention to. So really up until now in the mixes, I've really focused on audio processing, but also, we can get into, there's a lot more than just audio processing and mixing, obviously. Okay, so let's check this little bit out. It's also awesome. I love this line. It's really cool. Oh, hang on. Let's put it all on again.
You may hurt me
Okay, so these lines here, to try and get them to all come out. Listening to it now, it needs more work, I've got to say, but we can have a listen to it. So let's go back in and have a quick go through it. So with this electric guitar, it starts off. Yep. And then we've got this one here as well. Okay, so let's check these both out. And then the bass, of course, as well. Sorry, so this one. Okay, so it goes over 2 octaves and then down into the bass in the 3rd octave. So when these were unaffected, so let me just take everything off. It just felt it wasn't really matching with the bass, right? The bass was really beefy, and then these kind of weren't, so they felt separate. So I did do some EQ with the bass, but then I also did some processing of these. So there was quite a big push in the low mids on one of the parts, and then with the other one, okay, so I did the same thing to both of them. That's interesting. Oh no, wrong one. This was what I wanted to talk about. So I used, instead of using compression to really drive it, I did actually use compression, but it wasn't giving me enough. I felt like I wanted to kind of feel like pressed, I guess is the thing, right? So let's check. See if we can hear that with it on and off, okay? And that's on. Okay, so this is the Devil Lock from Sound Toys. So I put the crunch kind of midway, and then I brought the mix down quite a lot. So it's another kind of distortion technique. It's not saturation, it's more distortion, obviously. But it helped it to kind of press, and then to I don't know, to kind of blend in with the other part a bit better. So you be the judge whether or not that's worked. Let's listen to that phrase with the guitars all in. Cool, and I might turn that up even a bit more. And you can see here, there's quite a lot of cut in the low frequencies. These were really, there was a lot of low information in the guitars, and you can't hear it in the mix. And it felt as though it was getting in the way and getting in the clarity for the low parts, the bass and the drums. Okay. 4th dimension of mixing. Yes, do it. Exactly. 4 dimensions. Hello, future sound beat. How's it going, mate? Nice to see you there. Okay, so and the final thing that I wanted to talk about, which I would like to talk to the artist or the producer about this, is that there were these parts here that I am not sure whether or not they're aiding and helping and improving the song. So I'd want to have a chat with the producer to try and understand their intention so I could get a bit better inside it. So the other aspect to this is that they were so quiet that you could barely hear them. So that says to me when something's really, really quiet, I would be like, okay, does the producer not know whether it should be there or not? Because, if there's going to be a sound, if you have a sound in a track, we want to hear it. Otherwise, why is it there? Unless it's a layer of another part where it's playing a role, and that's fine, obviously, but it needs to then work rhythmically, I guess, with this other part. So let's have a listen to this. Piano part. And there were some parts for me where harmonically it was a bit clashy. There is a moment in the middle where it works as a breakdown, but there were parts here where it didn't really, I don't quite get it. So I'll put it in and we can hear it.
Think straight. Smile at you while you're laughing at me.
I'm starting to get harmonically what the producer's thinking, but I would, in this instance, and now this is not something I would normally do, but if I feel as a mix engineer that there's something like this, I would have a conversation and I'd talk to them about it and I'd say, like, my professional opinion is that I think that it's not working in this verse part, although I think it works in that part. Because there's some kind of harmonic clash there that doesn't seem to kind of work in the context of putting the mix together. So I think, and I wanted to bring this forward because I think it's an interesting thing to be aware of, which is to say just because it's there doesn't mean it should be. So this doesn't happen very often. It's very rare. And particularly when you're mixing your own stuff, it's hard to let go of your darlings sometimes. And this is why someone said, this is actually a good segue to a question that someone had, which was saying, do you mix your own tracks or do I get someone else? So up until now, I've always mixed my own music, and I'm kind of at a point where I'm sick of it. And I'm quite a control freak, and so I've always wanted to because I'm a mix engineer, I'm just like, I'm a mix engineer, why wouldn't I just mix it? But and for this specific reason here is that I think it's really one of the things that having other people involved in your process is that you get someone else's fresh experience, someone who you trust and someone who is a professional, and you've hired them to work for you, to give you, to have a conversation and to get a bit of like, oh, what do you think about this? And then to help you, I don't know, I just find if there are any little problems and stuff, you're more likely to catch it. So I think that I as soon as I can get over my control freak problems, I think that I'm going to try and release control. I do have a mastering engineer, so but I sit in on the mastering sessions. But I think it's a really healthy thing to do. Okay, Vico is saying, can you make notes on the tracks here, like in Logic? You can't make them underneath, but you can. There's a notes section in Logic, and you can make the notes on the side. This is cool. I did this mainly to kind of bring out the discussion today, but sometimes I do this in my mixes as well for notes and things like that. So that's what I'd put in when I'm doing my discovery and framing. Have a listen, have a look, and write stuff down as I hear it. Okay. So I think that's where we'll leave it for today. Time flies, as always, as we're having fun. So let's go through the questions and answer a few more questions, see where it's at. So, this is one I wanted to talk about. So Thomas Kerskens, hello, my friend, how are you? So you said, what do you think about dynamic resonance suppressors like Soothe? I love Soothe. I think it's amazing. I think it's really good. And I use it. I use it quite a lot on pianos, because often pianos have piano is one of the hardest instruments to record because it's so resonant, and there's so many problems with phase, potentially with different mic positionings and things like that. So I often find myself using it on pianos. I do use it on vocals as well. It's kind of the latest thing. I'm sure that a lot of you are also watching lots of different like big name mix engineers and stuff, as do I, and they are all obsessed. I think Billie Eilish's mixer, I think I watched something with him a couple weeks ago, and he had Soothe like everywhere. So I think it's good, but also with those kinds of things, I would, for me at least, if I can fix it the way that I do stuff, I'd go to that first, and I use things like Soothe if the just EQ doesn't work, basically EQ or dynamic EQ, then I would put that on. But yeah, it's real cool. Love it. Okay. What else have we got here? So Vico is saying, what are your thoughts on more reverb on the background vocals? So that's what you wrote down on the first listen. There should be more reverb on the BVs. Yes, I think that there should be, and I put them into the same kind of space as the main vocals, but I didn't want to make the vocals too like swimmy because I've decided to allocate the kind of larger ambient space to the guitars, and I felt that if I put the BVs in a washy space, we would lose them again. And one of the things that I was trying to do was get those vocals to like come through in the mix. So yeah, I think you need to be careful with large. I don't know how big the reverb you're thinking, but reverb is important, but not to make it diffuse. Yeah. Okay. So hang on a second. Sam's thinking about the main vocal. Yes, I mean both of them. I think I treated them actually the same, pretty much the same. Some of the EQ was slightly different, but other than that, they both went into the same processing, parallel processing with the slap and the ambient space. Yeah. All right. Maybe I'll come back to full face. I'm looking a bit pink, bit red. You've been working me hard today. Okay, so where else have we got? Any other questions and things like this? So someone's asking about when is a good situation to make a submix? I see there's 2 questions there from you, Sam. So a good situation to make a submix, I mean, I think that's a difficult question to kind of answer. This is one, this is a situation. But for me, if there are parts that are working together to create a cohesive layer, right? For me, these guitars there's lots of different bits to them. And so for me, I didn't feel that. So you've got to ask yourself the question, why am I submixing? So one of them would be to have a volume control. So I could just group these and then I could move them together, or I could use a VCA fader. If I'm going to use a submix, which is going to send the audio all to one channel, I might want to do that for stem bouncing, in which case, yeah, totally use a submix. Or in a more creative mix sense, if I wanted to do processing to them, right? So maybe compression or EQ or whatever. So that's the time those are the different situations when I'd be thinking about a submix. Like drums, quite often they move, all the different parts want to add up to a whole of a groove that's working together. So often it works to have a submix of the drums where you put a glue, a bus compressor or something on them to help them to feel more unified. So also if there's lots of backing vocals, then they would often make sense to be put into a submix. So I hope that answers your question. What else have we got? There's another one. Sam, you're getting. I'm answering quite a few questions you've asked today. Another question will be, how do the effects that are already on the stems influence the mixing? That is a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it. It makes mixing harder, is the easiest way for me to say it. I would much prefer to have I mean, there's two aspects to it. Delays and reverbs on stems makes it hard. Well, it also, you've sacrificed depth perception, and you can have some problems with kind of, if you try to, widen stereo. I can't do much stereo widening. There's things like that it can create a bit more problems, I guess. So, I mean, it's all fine. Like, as a mix engineer, you work with what you've got, right? But in a perfect situation, I'd like to have their effects separately, parallel or turned off, so I can process it. It's always really good to have them because that's the creative decision of the producer. But you'd want one wet and one dry, and even better, you'd want them in two separate, like one dry and then the effects as a separate, so you can blend them in. As a mix engineer, I would try and see if I can get the same effect but better, right? Or if not, I'd leave it on. Maybe I clean it up and maybe I don't do anything, but I would, definitely want it separate. The other thing is about thinking here with the only other thing for me is that the drums were a stereo drum part, and this mix in particular would have benefited from me having kick and snare and the toms separate for me to also work with that. With the bass, it would be easier and faster. Yeah. What else we got? Cool. Yeah, I mean, as Drunk Bishop is saying here, so sending a reference track with your mix so the person can understand what's going on. I think it's helpful sometimes to have the effect stems sent as well in the mix, because in just the mix as a stereo file, it's sometimes you can't hear all the information. So it's cool if you can. I think it's great to bounce the effects, parallel effects channels, or if you actually put reverbs and delays on the vocal. Like, I don't do that, but a lot of people do, and that's totally fine. Send one dry and one wet, so we can really listen to the vocal effects just by themselves. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So also, yeah, someone's saying it's good to send a reference track that you like the mix of. That's also really important. And for me, when I'm mixing with a client, I would generally, before I take on a job, we'd have a chat and we'd listen and we'd think about, like, okay, what music were you listening to when you wrote the album, or what, do you have a specific idea in mind that you're trying to achieve with the production, or do you want the mix to go in a specific direction? So these kinds of questions, and listening to music is the way for the mixer and the client to kind of know that you're on the same page. Then I listen to that as I'm preparing in the studio, and then I also can have it as a reference to listen to. And particularly when you're starting out as a mix engineer, I think everyone should have a reference track in their mix, in their DAW, to keep you honest, because these amazing tracks, that's where you're going to learn the most, is can I make my mix sound as good as, whoever mixed my favorite track, right? That's the goal. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So if you have any questions, I haven't answered them, please put them back in the chat now, because I'll stick around for a few more minutes to make sure that everyone who's asked a question has been answered. Cool. Pablo, hey, welcome nice to see you from Argentina. How's it going? What else we got? All right. I think that might be it. So I'll say again, please submit your tracks. I've got a couple. We've got like 4 new ones that were sent in. So I'm going to look at those. If you also want to get your track mixed, please send it in. Vico was asking for some one-on-one mix feedback, I think, and that is not possible. I mean, you can email me and you can hire me. That's also fine. My email or my website is janearnison.com, so check it out. If anyone wants me to do a mix for them, that's my job, so I'd love to do it. So get in touch. And just in terms of the ADSR stream context, I will do a session. Maybe I'll do a beginning of a session or something like that, where I go through go through a couple of your tracks, 5 minutes each or something like that, before we get into the mix. Maybe I should do that as a standard kind of thing from now on, so we can give more people opportunity for feedback. Yeah. All right. One cool question just came in at the bell. Christian is saying, if I could, what would be my dream console emulation plugin? Well, let's talk about my dream console. Does anyone know? Has anyone been on my streams for a while and can have a guess to what my dream console is? You can probably see it in some of the effects I'm using here. I'm a big fan of SSL consoles. I absolutely love them, and I love to. Yeah, William knows. Yeah, I just love working on them. So I yeah, SSL. Everyone's got it. Yeah. So and there's not one dream emulation. Like I really like the UAD stuff. I actually don't use the UAD SSL stuff that much, I've got to say. I love the Waves SSL. I think it's awesome. I've used it for however long it's been out, and I think it's amazing. So yeah, I've heard that is it the Brainworks or the Plugin Alliance one is really good. Anyway, the final thing I'll say to that is that really the great thing about digital workflow and digital mixing is that, because obviously if you could, well, you can in digital now, is to have, sometimes you want the SSL EQ color, sometimes you want the API, sometimes you wish you had, the compressor circuit of the SSL channel and then the EQ of the API. So it's pretty amazing. They're all so good and they all have different characters and styles, and they're useful for different things. So, I mean, the answer to that is all of them. I want all of them always, all the time. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, everyone, we'll leave it at that. Greedy plugin addicts anonymous. And we'll see. So I'm here actually every week for the next month. I'm going to do some production stuff next week. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing yet. So maybe if you have ideas in production, what do you want to know? What are the areas? Vocal production or sound design, or I don't know. Let me know. If I don't hear from you, I'll make something up and I'll do something cool. But I'd always obviously like to tailor it to what you're interested in. Yes. Okay, everyone. That's a wrap for today. And Dan, you got your question in really okay. I'm going to answer it. Can I quickly ask you about the headache of listening to mastered reference tracks? I find it hard to judge what I should be aiming for as the final sound. Yeah, that's actually a good question. I will take it up in more detail at another stream. But one way around it is to turn on a limiter on your mix only when you're kind of doing a listening comparison. I think that's really helpful. And to remember that what a limiter does. So it obviously compresses the sound, but it adds a boost in upper partial, so the upper frequencies. I'll leave it at that, but Dan, please join the stream again. I didn't talk about my mix bus today. We'll take this conversation up and we'll talk a bit more. Maybe I'll bring in some references and we'll talk a bit more about matching references in the future streams. All right, everyone, that's a wrap for today. Have a lovely week. I'll see you later. Ciao.